I started reading The Lean Startup earlier this week and I seriously cannot put it down. The book is addictive, especially for people like me who are deep in the entrepreneurial space and the startup world. So if you're in the same shoes, trust me, when you read it, you won't be able to put it down either. So the book is divided into about 12 main chapters. So by our rule of dividing into 4 reading quarters, I'll be talking about the first 3.5 chapters in this episode. So basically the first few chapters are mainly about introducing the reader to the lean startup way of thinking. The book starts out by establishing that startups are full of uncertainty. And because of this uncertainty, traditional approaches to building products simply don't work in the startup world. Because truly and truly, you don't actually know what you're building. The whole goal is to start building what people want right from the beginning and eliminate all kinds of waste associated with building things that people essentially don't want. So it encourages people to look at the startup product development process more like driving a car than launching a rocket. So to compare, when you're driving a car, you get in your car, you get in your car to set off and you know your destination already, but you don't know what you're going to meet along the way. You kind of know the path you're going to take. So when you set off, you start moving. If you meet some traffic, you might divert and go a different way, but you're still heading in the same direction. If you meet some pedestrians crossing the road, you stop, you slow down, they pass, you keep going. So as you meet obstacles along the way, you change your course till you meet your eventual goal. This is very much unlike a rocket, where you know your start, you know your ending, you know exactly where you're going to go, but before you launch a rocket, you're required to do a lot of mathematical arithmetic planning. So they do a lot of computer programming to kind of decide the path the rocket will take. And once they launch a rocket, that is it. They cannot change anything. This is why so many times, if something goes wrong during a rocket launch, the rocket just explodes, and a lot of money is lost in the way. So startups are more like driving a car than launching a rocket. The easiest way to go about making sure that you're building something that people really want is by starting small, with something that the book calls an MVP, a minimum viable product. This is like the simplest version, the scaled down version of what your eventual goal of the product in your head will look like. So if you strip the product down to its bare essentials, only what is absolutely important for you to kind of validate the idea that you have, that is your MVP. A good example of an MVP was Dropbox, the history of Dropbox. So the founder of Dropbox, Drew Houston, wanted to build a file sharing platform on the internet. But at the time when he wanted to do this, there were so many file sharing sites out there, and they were all pretty terrible, to be honest. They didn't work properly. So when he approached investors, they told him, look, there's so many of these products out there, what makes yours different? And he was trying to explain that the ease of use of my product will be different. You'll be able to move files seamlessly right on your desktop and it syncs to the cloud. So that was his big goal, but he couldn't show the investors straight up because building that product requires a high level of technical efficiency. It requires high-level programmers to get to work for a long period of time to build such a product, which is expensive. So in order for him not to waste any time or money building that product, he built instead an MVP. In fact, his MVP wasn't even the actual product. His MVP was simply a video. So what he did was create a video mock-up of what the interface of the software might look like and what it will feel like for the product to work. So he showed all the transitions, moving files all around on the platform and easily syncing between the cloud and your desktop using a fake video. So when he did this, he put it online and put a sign-up box, an early sign-up box, inviting people to put in their email address to indicate interest if they would like to be emailed when the product is ready. And that was his MVP. So he sent out a link to that page all over Silicon Valley in its early days, and tons of interest from people all around the valley came in through email signups. And he was able to then prove to investors that this product will actually work. That was him validating his idea with a very simple MVP. So looking at this idea of building an MVP first, the book establishes that the only goal of a startup should be to learn. And the leadership team, the management team in the startup must be very good at building environments for their people to learn constantly. If you take this approach, you will learn to build only what is absolutely necessary for your company to grow. So anything that is not equals to validated learning is an absolute waste of time and should be completely eliminated from your product development process. Because the book encourages learning and experimentation, it's easy to pass off failing at doing what you're doing as learning. Learning is not an excuse for failure. To avoid this little problem, the book encourages instead something called validated learning. Validated learning happens when you make changes to your product that result in an increase or a change in core metrics like revenue. So basically, if I make a change to my product and the amount of money I make goes up a little bit, what you've done there, you've learned a little bit more about what customers want. That is validated learning. So there's an example given in the book of the founder of Zappos, a guy called Nick. Zappos is an e-commerce site built for selling shoes, just shoes. It was acquired by Amazon recently for quite a few $1 million. So it was a good success. What Nick did was to build an MVP at the beginning. This company was started in 1999, so it was way back before the internet was what it is today. E-commerce was not as big as it is at all. In 1999, people were still even getting used to the idea of doing anything online, talk less of even buying shoes. Nick had a lot to prove. He had a lot of assumptions he was making about how things would work out that were very crucial to the success of the business. For example, how did he even know that people wanted to buy shoes online? How did he know that people would even accept the idea? How would people pay online? He had a lot of questions to answer. How would people even trust a shop that doesn't have a physical space that you can walk into? So instead of wasting any time trying to build a complex product that answers all those questions, what he did was build a simple MVP. He went to a shoe store and asked them, please can I take pictures of your shoes? He took pictures of the shoes pictures of all the shoes with his camera and then posted them on a website which is simply called shoesite.com. On shoesite.com, you can simply see shoes available and a button to say buy and put in your address for the shoes to come to you. He then sent out that MVP, marketed it a little bit to see whether anybody was interested in the site. So this was quite basic, but at least his aim was to prove that little concept that people will buy shoes online. That then resulted in a lot of validated learning. For example, something like a returns policy. So what he noticed was that adoption was slow at the beginning, but then he made a little change that included a return policy to say, oh, if the shoes aren't your size, you can return them, this is how it works out. And putting that return policy online increased the amount of trust that buyers had in the shoe site altogether. And all of a sudden, revenue went up because more people were buying shoes. That is validated learning. Something simple as well, like online payments. So back in those days in 1999, PayPal had just been founded earlier on, I think a year before. So online payments weren't a big thing yet. So a lot of people had to pay by checks. You had to sign a check and send it in the post, and then get the shoes sent back to them. And that takes a very long period of time, as you can imagine. So then they started experimenting with simple things like online payments and allow people to use their credit cards to check out online. That immediately they put in that feature, that resulted in a drastic increase in the number of people who are willing to buy shoes online because they made the buying process much simpler. That in itself is validated learning. What you notice about what Nick did was that he didn't make any assumptions and run with them. What he did was build a simple version and used real customer activity to judge whether he was doing the right thing. The people who clicked to buy on the website initially were actually willing to pay real money for a product that was bare bones. This is a real MVP because he didn't have to go all the way out to build a complex product that had all the dream features that you can imagine a shoe e-commerce site should have today. Simple and straightforward. The customers who adopt an MVP are usually what they call early adopters. These are people who are simply very excited by the fact that you're solving one of their biggest pain points. The people with the most intense need for your solution. These are the first people that ideally should be targeted by your MVP. And this is exactly what Nick did with his shoe site. Now, it's easy to say, well, I'm not building a product. I don't work in a startup, right? So how does this all apply to me? But in reality, the concept of building an MVP and applying validated learning can be used in any context in business, as long as you're dealing with a situation that has high uncertainty, whereas you don't know what the outcome will be, and you realize that you're making assumptions in business. You can apply the lean startup principles to it. In order to foster experimentation, it's important that you eliminate the fear of being wrong and run simple, small, safe experiments that can easily be validated through little changes in your product. One important thing is to be ready to face harsh reality, because many times when you start out and you start running experiments, you realize that a lot of the assumptions you made early on were most likely wrong. Those early tests will tell you what to eliminate completely and will steer you in the right direction on what to build.